What if I told you that humans weren't the only intelligent species roaming the Earth 40,000 years ago? That there was a group of humans, strong, resourceful, and surprisingly clever, living alongside our ancestors, and that some of them even live on in you today. Meet the Neanderthals. Neanderthals, often misrepresented as nothing more than dumb, grunting cavemen, actually had their own rich history, culture, and skills. For decades, they've been underestimated, but modern science is revealing a story far more fascinating than we ever imagined. So, who were they, really? Where did they come from? How did they survive the harsh Ice Age climates of Europe and Western Asia? And why did they eventually disappear, leaving only fragments of their DNA in us? In this video, we're going to uncover all of that and more. We'll start by exploring the origins of the Neanderthals, when they lived, where they roamed, and how their bodies and brains were uniquely adapted to survive the brutal cold of Ice Age Europe. Next, we'll dive into their intelligence and culture. You might be surprised to learn that they weren't just hunters and gatherers. They were toolmakers, fire users, clothing designers, and maybe even artists. Burial rituals. Evidence shows they cared for their sick and honored their dead. In short, they were far more sophisticated than the movies let on. Then we'll tackle the big mystery. Why did Neanderthals vanish? Was it climate change, competition with early modern humans, disease, or something else entirely? And here's the twist. Neanderthals didn't disappear completely. Thanks to interbreeding, most non-African humans today carry 1 to 2% of Neanderthal DNA. That means parts of their story live on in each of us. Finally, we'll look at the Neanderthal legacy and why understanding them matters today. From our immune systems to certain physical traits, and even our behavior, these ancient humans still influence our lives in ways we're only beginning to understand. If you're ready to dive into this incredible journey of discovery, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Trust me, you won't want to miss the surprises we have in store. So let's travel back in time, peel back the layers of history, and finally answer the question: who were the Neanderthals, really? So, now that we've sparked your curiosity, let's go back, way back. Neanderthal origins. Where and when did they live? Neanderthals first appeared around 400,000 years ago, during a time when Earth looked very different. Massive ice sheets covered much of Europe. Mammoths roamed the tundra, and survival meant being physically tough, clever, and constantly adapting to brutal environments. They weren't some offshoot experiment of evolution. Neanderthals were fully human, cousin species to us, Homo sapiens. Their scientific name is Homo neanderthalensis, named after the Neander Valley in Germany, where their fossils were first discovered in 1856. For most of their history, Neanderthals called Europe and parts of Western Asia home. From modern-day Spain to the Middle East, and even as far east as Siberia, they thrived in some of the harshest climates on the planet. But how did they survive for so long? Neanderthals were perfectly built for Ice Age life. They had shorter, stockier bodies than modern humans, ideal for retaining body heat. Their wide noses helped warm the freezing air before it entered their lungs. These physical traits weren't random. They were adaptations honed over hundreds of thousands of years. But they weren't just brute survivors, they were skilled. Neanderthals were expert hunters. Archaeological evidence shows they took down large animals like bison, deer, and even mammoths, using well-crafted stone tools and group hunting strategies. These tools weren't primitive rocks. They were sharp, shaped, and often specialized for cutting, scraping, or piercing. And they moved around. Contrary to the image of a static cave dweller, Neanderthals migrated with the seasons, following herds and resources. Caves were shelter, not prisons. In fact, they likely lived in temporary shelters, similar to early human campsites. Their brains, bigger than ours, on average. That's right, while brain size isn't everything. Neanderthals had larger brains than modern humans. Their skulls were shaped differently, but their capacity for problem-solving, planning, and memory was likely impressive. And get this, Neanderthals lived through multiple ice ages. They saw glaciers come and go, landscapes shift, and climates swing between freezing cold and warm interglacial periods. That kind of resilience isn't easy. It takes intelligence, adaptability, and community. So, when did it all end? Neanderthals disappeared around 40,000 years ago, not long after modern humans entered Europe. But more on that mystery later in this video. For now, it's important to realize something. Neanderthals weren't a failed branch of evolution. They were a successful human species that lived for hundreds of thousands of years, far longer than modern civilization has existed. They left behind more than bones and tools. They left a story, written in the earth, in caves, and even in our DNA. In the next part of this video, we'll dive into the heart of what made Neanderthals truly remarkable: their intelligence, creativity, and culture. From fire and clothing to potential artwork and symbolic burials, we're going to see a side of Neanderthals that history books rarely show. Stick around. It only gets more fascinating from here. Neanderthal intelligence and culture. So far, we've seen that Neanderthals were tough, intelligent survivors. But what if I told you they were also thinkers, creators, and caretakers? Let's bust the myth right now. Neanderthals were not dumb cavemen. In fact, modern research is revealing that Neanderthals had a rich inner world and lived lives full of creativity, planning, and even emotion. Let's start with tools. Neanderthals used a complex set of stone tools known as the Mousterian toolkit. These tools were carefully shaped for specific purposes: scraping hides, cutting meat, and shaping wood. Some were even attached to wooden handles using glue-like substances made from birch bark tar. That's not just clever, it's chemistry. Next, fire. Neanderthals weren't just using fire, they knew how to make it. Evidence shows they could start fires on demand using spark-producing stones like flint and pyrite. Fire meant warmth, protection, cooked food, and better nutrition. That's survival elevated to strategy. Now, clothing and shelter. Living through Ice Age winters meant Neanderthals needed to stay warm. They likely wore animal hides, tailored using stone tools and bone needles. There's also evidence they built temporary shelters out of wood, bones, and hide structures that gave them flexibility to move with the seasons. But what really makes them human is what they left behind. In Spain, researchers discovered cave paintings and sites that are over 65,000 years old, older than any known Homo sapiens art in Europe. And guess who made them? Neanderthals. That's right. They painted on cave walls, using red and yellow pigments, creating symbols and possibly abstract designs. Some even suggest they had a sense of aesthetics or spiritual expression, and they buried their dead. In places like Shanadar Cave in Iraq, skeletons have been found laid carefully in the earth, sometimes with flowers or tools nearby. Whether this was symbolic, religious, or simply a sign of care, it shows deep emotional and social connections. Speaking of care, Neanderthals looked after each other. Fossils show individuals who lived for years with severe injuries or disabilities: broken bones, damaged skulls, even amputations. They would have needed help to survive. That means compassion and cooperation were part of their culture. They also spoke probably. Neanderthals had a hyoid bone similar to ours, which supports the voice box, and their brains had the areas responsible for speech. While we don't know exactly what their language sounded like, it's highly likely they communicated with complex speech, gestures, or both. So, let's recap. They made tools and fire. They wore clothes. They built shelters. They may have created art and held symbolic burials. They cared for each other, and they possibly had language. Neanderthals weren't just surviving, they were living. In the next section, we're going to explore the big question: what happened to them? Why did a species that thrived for hundreds of thousands of years vanish so suddenly? And more importantly, did they really vanish at all? Don't forget to hit that like button if you're learning something new, and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this amazing story. Let's keep going. The big mystery. Why did Neanderthals go extinct? We've seen that Neanderthals were strong, intelligent, and adaptable. So here's the big question. Why did they disappear? Neanderthals thrived for over 350,000 years, but around 40,000 years ago, their population started to shrink. Within a few thousand years, they were gone. Or were they? Let us explore the leading theories behind the Neanderthals' mysterious extinction and the surprising twist that scientists have uncovered. First up, climate change. As the Ice Age advanced and retreated, Europe's environment went through wild swings: freezing cold to warmer, wetter climates. These shifts changed the landscapes, reduced the availability of big game animals, and made life harder for cold-adapted Neanderthals. They struggled to keep up, while Homo sapiens were better equipped to adapt to changing environments. Which brings us to theory number 2, competition. Modern humans began migrating into Europe around 50,000 years ago. We brought new tools, better hunting strategies, and larger social groups. Some scientists think we outcompeted Neanderthals for food, shelter, and territory. And it may not have been a peaceful competition. There's some evidence that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens clashed and possibly even fought. But there's also evidence of another kind of encounter, interbreeding. Yup, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals met and mated. DNA evidence has confirmed it. Today, most people of non-African descent carry about 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. That means if you're watching this from Europe, Asia, or the Americas, there's a piece of Neanderthal living inside you right now. So maybe they didn't fully go extinct after all. Maybe they were absorbed. That leads us to another theory: genetic dilution. Neanderthals may not have died off completely, but their populations could have been gradually swallowed up by the growing numbers of Homo sapiens. Over generations, their distinctive traits faded, replaced by the dominant Homo sapiens genome. But we're not done yet. Some researchers believe disease may have played a role. When Homo sapiens arrived in Europe, they could have brought new pathogens that Neanderthals had no immunity against, just like when Europeans arrived in the petty Americas thousands of years later. The result, a slow and painful decline. And then, there's the most likely scenario, a combination of all of the above: environmental pressure, competition, disease, and interbreeding. Together, these forces created the perfect storm, one that ultimately led to the end of the Neanderthal way of life. But remember, the story doesn't end in extinction. Neanderthals still exist in our genes, in the tools and artifacts they left behind, and in the questions we continue to ask about them. In our final segment, we'll look at the Neanderthal legacy, how their DNA affects us today, and why studying them helps us understand what it truly means to be human. Before we move on, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. What do you think happened to the Neanderthals? Let's finish the journey together. Legacy and relevance today, how Neanderthals live on in us. So here we are, the end of the Neanderthal story. Or is it? Because the truth is, they never completely disappeared. Thanks to modern genetics, we now know that Neanderthals live on inside us, not just as a historical curiosity, but as a very real part of who we are today. Let's start with the science. In 2010, scientists successfully sequenced the Neanderthal genome, and what they found was shocking. Up to 2% of the DNA in people of European and Asian descent comes from Neanderthals. That means millions, possibly billions of people walking the earth today carry Neanderthal genes in their bodies. But what does that actually mean? Well, researchers have discovered that these ancient genes affect more than you might expect. Some are linked to your immune system, helping early humans fight off diseases when they left Africa and entered new environments. Others influence your skin tone, hair color, and even how your body responds to sunlight. Incredibly, some genes may impact your sleep patterns, mood, and even your risk for certain illnesses, like type 2 diabetes or depression. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, scientists discovered that a segment of Neanderthal DNA could affect the severity of symptoms in some people. Think about that: something inherited from a relative who lived 50,000 years ago might shape how your body reacts to a modern virus. That's not just history, that's you. But the Neanderthal legacy isn't only found in DNA. Studying their lives has helped us answer deep questions about what makes us human. When we see that Neanderthals made art, cared for their sick, buried their dead, and formed strong social bonds, we start to realize that we weren't so different after all. They weren't just almost human, they were human, just a different kind. And their story forces us to challenge old ideas. For decades, scientists believed that humans were the only species with creativity, compassion, and culture. But now we know we shared the planet with others who thought, felt, and dreamed just like we do. That knowledge changes how we see ourselves. It reminds us that evolution wasn't a straight line, it was a complex, tangled family tree, full of branches that split, rejoined, and sometimes faded away. Neanderthals weren't failures, they were survivors, innovators, explorers of the ancient world, and they're part of our story. So next time you look in the mirror, remember you might be looking at a little bit of Neanderthal too. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into Neanderthal history, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos about ancient humans. archaeology, and the secrets of our past. And let us know in the comments what surprised you most about the Neanderthals. Thanks for watching, and remember, the past isn't just behind us, it's within us.